Okay, here's a question for you. What's up with Musk? What happened to Musk? In 2024 election, he starts out neutral, and then suddenly, like overnight, he becomes Black MAGA. What's going on there? And I'm not asking in the moral outrage sense, like how dare he, or how could someone, or what the fuck? No, I'm asking a psychological question, and not one to be answered with the usual neutral sounding name calling, like he's a narcissist, he's a psychopath. I want to get below that level to try to understand what goes on when someone does that, because you probably know some folks who've done that too. You probably know some folks who seem to be going along as decent folks with an active conscience. That is, they paid attention to their behavior, they were conscientious, and then suddenly they went for something like MAGA. What goes on when people do that? And I think the answer is quite simple. Maybe a little unfamiliar, maybe something that's a little disappointing. We don't want to admit to it. We'd rather do that kind of moralizing, talk about they're a narcissist, they're a psychopath, whatever. But I think we can get to a much simpler explanation, and it's worth doing. So let's try this out. There are psychopaths in the world. There are some people who are born without the kind of anxiety that nags at them when they have a guilty conscience. There are some people like that. They're called psychopaths. Okay, but you don't see psychopath epidemics. That's not what's going on here. There are decent folks who have a conscience that nags to some extent, and they're good at combating their conscience. They can come up with rationalizations and moralizations, but they are able sometimes to say that they're sorry, or that they've thought it over and realized that they'd made a mistake. There are lots of those. And then there are people who basically reassure and reaffirm their consciences no matter what. If conscience is an anxiety that nags at us, saying something's amiss, you did something wrong, your habits aren't working, and makes us think about it, that is, to actually put some work into rethinking what we do, that's an expensive thing to have. We'd like to say, just choose to be conscientious. That's not how it works. It's really costly. It ties your hands to have that anxiety and guilt going on inside of us. So it's worth recognizing that conscience is a burden. It's a hassle. It ties your hands. So what's the alternative to it? Well, if you figure out a way that you can keep your conscience permaffirmed, permanently affirmed, permanently reassured, what do you get for that? You get the freedom to do whatever you want and never have to worry about it costing you. You're free and you're safe. That is, no deed too dirty for a saint like you. So there would be lots of reasons why we would want to basically put our lullaby our consciences into a state of permanent self-reassurance. It's very understandable that we would want to do that. And the question is, how do you do it? How do you do that? The simplest way to do it is to find some vague goal, eternal goal, ultimate goal, the supreme meaning of life, and declare yourself a missionary for it. So you basically find yourself a master excuse. MAGA is a good example. Doing God's will is a good example. There are plenty of examples. You can do it for the left, right, religious, spiritual. You can do it just because you consider yourself the authority. And once you have done that, then no deed is too dirty for a saint like you. No deed is too dirty for a Christian like me, or for a MAGA like me, or for a spiritual person, or for a mindful person. Once again, it doesn't matter what it is, and it's kept plenty vague. It's just that it's the cause that trumps all other causes. That's all that you have to do. And then what do you become? You become a holy warrior. So here's the interesting thing about narcissists. You can't get narcissists to look at themselves. That's funny, isn't it? I mean, it was named after a guy who couldn't stop looking at himself. What's the explanation for that? It's very straightforward. They're not looking at themselves. They're looking at themselves as a holy warrior. They're looking at a self-idealization. They're gazing constantly at that. They're gazing at a dream idealized version of themselves. It's kind of like fake it till you make it, but in the process you break it. You break your connection to reality. You know, in order to be a holy person, I will act like a holy person to kind of kickstart it. And pretty soon I'll be a holy person. No, what happens pretty soon is that you start to talk like you're a holy person, even though you're a normal person. You're just another schmuck. You're just another person. But you start to pretend that you are aligned with this highest cause. So you can think of it this way. I don't know what the fuck to do with my life. The anxiety's become too much, so I've decided to surrender my will to God. And so I'm not very specific about what God wants. Maybe there's some rituals, maybe there's a few constraints, like I don't do this or that. But other than that, I am loved by Jesus, which means that anything I do in my life is perfectly okay, because in the end, at the final analysis, Jesus and God will approve of me and I will get into heaven hereafter. Think of what bliss that would be. If you had a conscience that could do that, that could just surrender into that kind of deference to a higher power, a higher cause, you know, basically humbling yourself before the Lord so you can lord it over everyone else. No one else can get near you because you have the loftiest goal. And you don't even have to have a goal. You can just have a self-idealization. That is, you can make yourself into a cult of personality where the only personality involved that you're cultish about is your idealization of yourself. Your only cause is cause you said so. So it's easy to understand how someone could go from being someone who's claiming to be neutral before the election to becoming absolutely black MAGA to the max overnight, simply by doing this. Think of the benefits of doing it, think of the cost of not doing it, and think of what it gets you, and think of how easy it is to make that transition. We don't pay enough attention to this explanation, and perhaps because we'd rather not. We'd rather actually think of ourselves as the holier holy warrior against the holy warrior. So we declare that they're narcissists or psychopaths, and we don't think through the details of what would be motivating someone to do this. If you want to understand your friends who were otherwise decent people and still are decent people in their everyday life, if you want to understand how they lost their conscience in dealing with MAGA, I suggest this as the approach. They're not psychopaths. They have consciences. Their consciences are perfectly, permanently, eternally reassured. No deed too dirty for a holy warrior saint like them, because they are aligned with the highest mission. Never mind what it is. Never mind how we'd actually make America great again. That's irrelevant. All that's relevant is that I am now a holy warrior for the highest possible cause. So as a result, I've won myself a wild card trump card. I can do whatever I want, and whatever I do is supreme. It's serving the highest goal. You know, some people have argued that the problem with narcissists or psychopaths and all of them is that the ends justify the means. I don't think that covers it. I do lots of things where my ends justify the means. I mean, if I jaywalked to save a life, those ends are justifying the means to me. No, what I'm talking about here is people who pretend they have the highest end possible. That is, they serve the supreme goal and therefore allow themselves any means at all. They are unconstrained, they are freed, they are liberated. Their conscience doesn't nag at them anymore. And I prefer to be a person who has a conscience that nags at me. If I don't want to be an asshole, I have to expect some anxiety, and I'm willing to take my fair share of it. I'm willing to stomach it, and it is a feeling thing. When I have doubt, it's a knot in my stomach. It's a sense, it's a feeling that something is amiss. So, you can think of it like a dummy ache, like I'm a dummy, like maybe I was a dummy there, that kind of thing. I have to tolerate my fair share of that. I think we all do, and I think we have to get better at figuring out how to get these holy warriors to stomach their fair share of anxiety and doubt. Because at this point, what they do, once they become holy warriors, that is, if anybody should doubt, it's anyone but me. That's what they're doing. If anybody should have anxiety, it's anyone but me. And so a lot of my work is on how to figure out better ways to get people to stomach their fair share of anxiety and doubt. How to cultivate doubt tolerance in people who have basically permaffirmed their consciences. So how to do that? We have a study group that meets every other Sunday in the morning. It's people from all over the country and some people from around the world who join in and are just trying to figure out better answers to that question. How do you get people to stomach their fair share of anxiety, or at least some anxiety, rather than saying if anybody should doubt, it's anybody but me? It's strictly strategic. It's completely free. I don't share your email with anybody. We just get together. We talk about various things we're trying, let's say with a Trumpist or with any kind of absolutist, and we think through how to make those strategies more effective. The way I think about it is that these are people who have retreated or retired into a spiked suit of armor, and they're just hiding in there. So the question is, how do you coax out the human being in there? Or how do you poke them in the eye? Because once you're in there, why would you ever want to leave? So sometimes you just got to figure out a way to make it cost them. And you're not going to succeed by calling them hypocrites. They like being hypocrites. The powerful holy warrior has a consistent claim of the highest possible goal. So no deed too dirty for a saint like them. Hypocrisy is it's a status symbol to Trumpists. You're not going to gain any traction with them by saying, you're hypocritical. No, that's actually a badge of honor from their perspective. Rich and powerful people like Trump and Musk, they have the luxury not afforded to lowly people. They have the luxury of hypocrisy. They can follow their impulses. And that's what I'm saying we gain when we claim for ourselves some master excuse. No deed too dirty for a saint like me. No deed too inconsistent for a saint like me. Because I can do anything and I will be granted the heaven hereafter. There.